I want you to start off today by closing your eyes. Well, unless you're driving, of course.
Right, definitely keep them open if you're behind the wheel.
Exactly. But if you can, paint a mental picture for me. I want you to imagine a massive, sprawling, open-pit mine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about a gigantic, carved-out section of the Earth. Picture winding dirt roads spiraling all the way down into the depths of this massive, dusty crater.
Just massive scale.
Exactly. There is heavy machinery absolutely everywhere. 3-story tall dump trucks, excavators with buckets the size of studio apartments.
It's hard to even conceptualize how big those are.
It really is. And you have intricate scaffolding systems erected precariously against the sheer rock face, and hundreds of people coordinating this incredibly complex, high-stakes operation. Now ask yourself, what would happen if you just let all those people and all those machines loose in that giant pit without a flawless, crystal-clear blueprint?
I mean, it would be absolute unmitigated chaos.
Total disaster.
Completely. You'd have heavy machinery bottlenecked on narrow dirt roads. You'd have engineering teams building scaffolding right where the blasting crew is, about to set explosives.
Which is terrifying to think about.
Right. And a massive burn rate of capital resulting in absolutely zero forward progress. When the stakes are that high and the moving parts are that massive, winging it isn't just inefficient, it's catastrophic.
Total operational collapse. And that image, that massive, multi-layered logistical puzzle, is the perfect backdrop for what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a great visual to start with.
Thanks. Because our source material for this conversation is, well, it's an internal training document.
Straight from the source.
Yep, it's titled Planning and Monitoring, or ODSD-04, and it comes straight out of the Supervisory Skills Development Program of Fubai Mining.
Which sounds incredibly niche at first glance.
It does, right. I know what you might be thinking. An internal corporate mining manual. Why are we reading this? But the mission of our deep dive today is to extract the corporate blueprint for large-scale operational planning hidden inside this document.
And translate those nuggets of insight into a practical framework.
Exactly. A framework that you can apply to your own life and your own high-stakes projects. We want to help you avoid information overload and keep your own daily operations from turning into a chaotic crater.
Because when you look past the specific industry applications, it is far more than just a dry business manual.
Oh, absolutely.
It strips away the usual corporate fluff and gets right down to the fundamental truth of how human beings coordinate complex tasks, how we process dependencies, and, honestly, how we routinely sabotage our own efforts when we fail to prepare properly. It is actually a brilliant look at the psychology of execution.
Okay, let's unpack this. The document kicks things off by introducing what it calls the 4 functions of management. But rather than just reading these off like a textbook, let's look at them through the lens of our open pit mine. The first pillar is planning.
The foundational piece.
Yeah, that is the architectural blueprint. It's deciding exactly how deep this pit needs to go and what ore we are targeting. Then the second pillar is organizing.
Which is more about the logistics.
Right, the physical coordination, making sure the trucks, the fuel, the personnel, and the budget are actually in place to execute the blueprint.
Got it.
Pillar 3 is leading, which is essentially guiding the crew, supporting the personnel on the ground, and keeping morale and focus sharp. And the final pillar is controlling.
Meaning monitoring.
Exactly, the monitoring phase. It's checking the daily extraction tonnage against the blueprint to make sure we aren't digging in the wrong direction.
What's fascinating here is how the source specifically zeroes in on and redefines that very first pillar. Planning.
Yeah, it really hones in on it.
It forces us to look at planning not just as a prerequisite, but as the actual day-to-day habit of preventing operational collapse. It defines a plan very specifically as a predicted course of action.
A predicted course of action. I like
Yeah,
that.
and not just any course of action, but one designed to achieve specific, measurable results in the most efficient and effective way possible. It distills this down to 3 core components.
That's right.
Knowing what you are trying to achieve, understanding why you need to achieve it, and deciding how you will do it.
Right, the what, the why, and the how.
Yeah.
But here is where the document debunks a major myth that I think plagues a lot of modern professionals.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to view planning as a necessary evil.
Oh, definitely. Like a chore.
Exactly. It is the tedious paperwork we have to suffer through before we get to do the real work. But the text explicitly states that planning is not something additional to your work. It is part of your work. It is a daily habit.
That is a massive mindset shift. There's a psychological bias toward action that makes us want to just start digging.
Because digging feels like progress.
Exactly. Digging feels like you're doing something. Measuring the hole, calculating the slope angles, double-checking the geological surveys, that feels like a delay. But the text is arguing that if you are a supervisor, a manager, or honestly just a professional trying to navigate a complex workload, planning isn't the prequel to the job. It is the core competency.
I completely agree. And the reality is we are already doing it constantly, just poorly.
True.
Think about your morning commute.
Yeah.
You aren't just driving. You're silently, mentally mapping the dependencies of your team's Q3 deliverables, trying to figure out if marketing needs to sign off before engineering pushes the update. Your brain is a continuous planning machine.
It is. The cognitive wheels are always turning. We are constantly modeling future scenarios.
Always.
But the danger, as the training document lays out, is what happens when we leave all of those complex dependencies strictly inside our own working memory, especially when we step into a cross-functional team environment. That is when the mental models start to clash.
Which brings us to the dark side of this whole equation, the chaos of poor planning.
It gets messy.
The source outlines some very specific, painful effects of operating without a shared blueprint. And reading through this list, it felt incredibly familiar. It talks about work simply not getting completed to schedule.
A classic symptom.
It mentions the rushing at the last minute to meet deadlines, which always degrades quality. But the one that really hit home for me was the duplication of work.
Oh, that is the worst one.
I mean, think about a massive software launch, or even just planning a large conference, and realizing two separate departments just spent a week building the exact same database because they didn't coordinate.
It is a massive waste of energy.
And it all stems from a general confusion between people about who is doing what and when.
And amid all those operational pitfalls, the text zeroes in on what it literally calls the biggest problem.
The biggest problem.
The ultimate hurdle we face when trying to complete planned work isn't a lack of capital, and it isn't a lack of time or talent. The text identifies the biggest problem as getting other people or departments to actually understand what you are trying to achieve and why you are doing it.
That is profound, and I want to push on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because as a professional, you can have the most brilliant, optimized timeline in your head. You can see the whole matrix.
But it doesn't matter if it stays in your head.
Right. If you can't translate that vision into a shared reality, you are entirely stuck. To go back to our mining imagery, you're aggressively building a massive, complex scaffolding structure on the rock face. But nobody else on the crew knows what the structure is actually meant to support.
Are we bracing for a blast, or are we building a walkway?
Exactly. If they don't know the what and the why, they can't help you build it.
We assume our internal blueprint is obvious to everyone else. It rarely is. Which is why the transition from a mental plan to a shared, tangible plan is the critical leap in any operation.
But wait, this brings up a real point of friction. To write or not to write?
Ah, the analysis paralysis question.
Yeah, because if I have to draft a formal written manifesto for every single cross-functional task I do, I'm going to spend 100% of my time planning and 0% actually executing. That sounds like a recipe for getting absolutely nothing done. How do we avoid just pushing paper?
It is a completely valid concern, and I love how you framed that. It is why the training document provides highly specific threshold criteria. It doesn't tell you to write down everything.
Thank goodness.
It tells you to develop written plans only when you cross into certain levels of complexity. First, when you have several different people or departments involved and their efforts need to be synchronized.
Makes sense.
Second, when there are a number of sequential stages or steps that must happen in a strict order.
Right. You can't pour the foundation after you've built the walls. Or, in the mine, you can't send the extraction trucks down before the blasting crew has cleared the path.
Precisely. You need the order to be visible. The third criterion is when communication is required, simply so that people do not forget what they are meant to do over time.
Because memory fades.
Quickly. And the fourth is when the work will be completed in different stages over a period spanning days, weeks, or months.
Okay, that actually completely removes the guesswork. It acts as a pragmatic filter for you as a listener.
It really does.
When you are looking at an upcoming project and you ask yourself, should I make a formal plan for this? You just run it through those 4 questions. Are multiple people involved? Are there strict sequential stages? Is there a risk of the details decaying in people's memories? Will this span days, weeks, or months?
If you hit yes on those.
The cognitive load is too heavy for mental planning. You need a written blueprint.
That is an excellent summary. It saves you from the trap of over-planning a simple, localized task while ensuring you don't underplan a massive initiative that involves 3 different departments and a 2-month timeline. It is about matching the rigor of the plan to the complexity of the operation.
Okay, so once we've crossed that threshold and established that we absolutely need a written plan, how do we actually construct one that works?
The manual has a process for that, too.
It does. The document provides a highly structured 6-step planning cycle. I want to briefly map out the whole cycle so we can see the full architecture, but then I want to deliberately zoom in on just the first 2 steps.
Okay, just the first 2.
Because the manual makes a compelling case that if you fail at the start, steps 3 through 6 are completely useless.
A strong approach. Let's look at the life cycle.
Right, so the cycle flows like this. Step 1 is establishing the target or goal, finding the destination. Step 2 is identifying the work that has to be done, taking inventory.
Got it.
Step 3 is determining the sequence of that work, building the roadmap. Step 4 is determining the resources needed, gathering the fuel and the crew. Step 5 is scheduling and communicating the plan, broadcasting the blueprint. And finally, Step 6 is implementing and monitoring the reality check.
It is an incredibly logical flow. It moves sequentially from the abstract concept all the way down to the physical execution and the feedback loop.
It does. But the text places a disproportionate amount of weight on Step 1. Set your target or goal. It calls this the critical starting point.
Without a destination, you can't map the route.
Exactly. It compares this step to identifying a destination on a map. The logic is inescapable. If you are not ruthlessly clear about exactly where you want to end up, it is practically impossible to plan how to get there. In our open pit mine, if you don't know the exact depth, diameter, and mineral target of the pit, how can you possibly calculate how many excavators you need?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, setting that target is fundamentally about creating an objective metric for success. A vague goal creates vague alignment.
So how do we fix that?
The document gives us a concrete formula to solve this. To be functional, a goal absolutely must state 3 distinct things: what is to be done, why it is necessary, and how you will measure if you have been successful or not.
The measurement piece seems crucial.
That measurement piece is the anchor. Without it, you can never definitively prove that your plan actually worked or if you just got lucky.
To really bring this to life, let's deconstruct the exact real-world example the text uses. Because this isn't some theoretical academic exercise. This is how a massive mining operation trains its leaders to structure their thinking.
It's very practical.
The example goal provided in the manual is this: design, develop, and deliver planning training courses so that 95% of all supervisors and superintendents have received basic training and planning skills by the end of August 2008.
That is a masterclass in goal setting. Let's break down exactly why it works based on the formula we just discussed and compare it to how most people normally write goals.
How do they normally write them?
Well, most managers would just write, conduct planning training for the team. That is a fundamentally broken goal. It is an activity, not a destination.
Right. Conduct training just means people are in a room talking. There's no defined endpoint. But the document's goal starts with a highly specific what? Design, develop, and deliver training courses in planning skills. It encompasses the entire life cycle of the training.
Exactly. Then you have the measurable target. They didn't just say train the supervisors. They set a hard mathematical metric: 95% of all supervisors and superintendents.
Which changes everything. Because at the end of the project, there is absolutely no ambiguity. You don't have to rely on a gut feeling about whether the training was successful.
No guessing required.
You either hit 95% penetration across the leadership tier or you didn't. You can hold a clipboard, run the numbers, and objectively score the operation.
Precisely. And finally, they anchor it to a specific point in time. By the end of August 2008, this combination, the clear life cycle of the task, the measurable 95% threshold, and the firm deadline, provides an irrefutable mechanism to determine if the plan achieved its intended result.
It forces total clarity. And as the document points out, setting a target with this level of precision forces us to think deeply about what we actually want and why it matters, which directly solves that biggest problem we talked about earlier.
Departmental confusion.
Yes. When you hand a cross-functional team that specific August 2008 goal, everyone immediately knows what game they are playing and exactly how to keep score. The what and the why are locked in.
Now, once you have that crystal clear destination, you know exactly where the bottom of the pit needs to be. You move to step 2 of the cycle, identifying what has to be done. And this is where human psychology usually trips us up.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text gives a piece of advice for step 2 that, on the surface, feels completely counterintuitive to the idea of planning.
It does.
It says that in this stage, you need to write a list of all the individual tasks that need to be completed to achieve the goal. But, and this is the critical caveat, at this stage, you must not worry about the sequence of the work. Just make a list of the things that need to be done.
From a cognitive load perspective, that is brilliant advice.
Really? Why is that?
Because when we face a massive multi-tiered project, our natural instinct is to try and simultaneously figure out every single task and place them in perfect chronological order. We try to map the dependencies while we are still brainstorming the components.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Most people do. But that is a massive drain on our working memory, and it leads directly to paralysis, information overload, and ultimately dropped tasks. By strictly advising you to just make a list, the text is telling you to separate the act of creation from the act of curation.
It's the ultimate brain dump. Let's apply this back to our mining operation. Step 2 is the equivalent of dumping all the raw and unrefined ore into a massive pile in the center of the yard before you even attempt to sort the copper from the dirt. You don't try to sort it while you're digging it out of the wall.
That is a perfect analogy. You are gathering the raw material of the project.
And if we look at how the text applies this to our training rollout example, it makes perfect sense. You've got your target for August 2008. Step 2 is just throwing every required action item onto the page as it comes to you.
Just getting it out of your head.
Right. You need to book a training room. You need to schedule the course dates. You have to send out schedules to the department manager so they can nominate people. You need to send out confirmation notices to the attendees. You just get all these distinct blocks out of your head and onto the paper.
And you explicitly ignore the fact that you obviously have to schedule the dates before you can send out the confirmation notices. The chronology does not matter yet.
That's liberating, honestly.
It is. That is step 3's problem. Step 2 is purely about gathering your resources and ensuring nothing is forgotten.
I think this is a huge takeaway for you listening right now. When you are sitting at your desk, feeling completely overwhelmed by an impending project or a chaotic week, it's usually because you are trying to do step 2 and step 3 at the exact same time.
Trying to organize thoughts you haven't even fully formed yet.
You're trying to build the scaffolding while you are still digging the dirt. This brain dump stage gives you professional permission to just gather the building blocks. It relieves that immense mental pressure.
It absolutely does. It recognizes human limitations. First, you generate the raw list of tasks without judging their order or their dependencies. Later, once the cognitive burden of remembering the tasks is safely transferred to a piece of paper, you can use your full mental capacity to curate that list into a logical sequence. It is a highly efficient, psychologically safe way to manage your own mental energy.
So what does this all mean? We started today by peering into a massive open-pit mine and opening up an internal training document from Fu Biomining.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. And we easily could have found a dry, bureaucratic manual full of corporate jargon. But what we actually extracted was a highly practical, deeply psychological philosophy for operating in complex, high-stakes environments.
It really is a philosophy.
We learned that planning isn't some rigid cage that restricts your freedom to operate. And it certainly isn't an annoying extra chore piled on top of your real work. Planning is the work.
It is the core competency.
It is the daily habit of mapping the dependencies so the operation doesn't collapse. It is the discipline of defining your destination with ruthless mathematical clarity, your own 95% by August 2008. It is about articulating the why, so you don't run into that biggest problem of departmental confusion and duplicated effort.
And giving yourself grace.
Yes, perhaps most importantly, it's about giving yourself the grace to separate brainstorming from sequencing, breaking down massive tasks into a simple, unorganized brain dump of raw material to save your time, your project, and your sanity.
This raises an important question. The text states very clearly that the biggest problem we face in operational execution is getting others to understand what we are achieving and why. We assume our internal blueprint is obvious.
But it isn't.
Right. But if we turn that mirror around and apply it inward, we have to ask ourselves, how much of our own daily stress, our own anxiety, and that creeping feeling of being overwhelmed comes from running through unwritten, complex life plans without ever clearly defining the measurable what and the meaningful why for ourselves? If we haven't objectively defined our own destination, how can we possibly expect to arrive there without chaos?
That is a deeply clarifying thought to leave on. If you can't articulate your own 95% metric for your own goals, you might just be driving heavy machinery around in circles at the bottom of a very deep, very dusky pit. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you take these tools, grab a piece of paper, run your projects through those threshold criteria, and start turning your own raw ore into a clear, written blueprint. We will catch you next time.